They remembered humanity by its ghosts. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the Intersector Authority cruiser Aegis, a place where ghosts were made real by data. Before her, the main holographic display rendered the Kepler 186F system not as a place of 5 known worlds, but as a graveyard. The shattered remnants of a Dyson sphere, a Dyson choir, glittered like crushed bone around its patient red dwarf star. This was the frontier where the law was a flickering candle against a hurricane of entropy and greed. The stakes were simple: hold the line against the scavenging fleets of the Obsidian Anchorage, a pirate citadel carved into a rogue asteroid. The alternative was to cede another system to the slow, grinding horror of lawlessness. Deep within the debris field, a place navigation charts marked only with warnings of gravimetric shear and sensor ghosts lay the system's oldest secret. It was a whisper in the data, a resonance that defied explanation, a signature so ancient it predated the diaspora itself. Dr. Aris Thorne, the ship's historian and resident mystic, called it the Seraph. Legend claimed it was a warship from the cradle, a vessel built when humanity's reach was small, but its will was absolute. A sleeping judge, its sigil a quill laid across a balanced scale, awaited a worthy successor. Rostova saw only a variable energy reading a potential threat to be catalogued and avoided. She dealt in vectors and burn percentages, not myths. The fleet mind of the Aegis Solon spoke in her ear, its voice a calm cascade of synthesized tones. Commander long-range scans confirm 3 Carrion King barges breaking formation from the anchorage. Their projected vector intercepts the civilian freighter Starlight's Hope in 92 minutes. Rostova's jaw tightened. The Starlight's Hope was a relief vessel carrying medical supplies for the beleaguered mining outpost on Kepler 186e. It was a soft target chosen for maximum terror. This was their method, a cruel arithmetic of suffering. The choice was hers: engage a superior force and risk the Aegis, or watch more innocents pay the price for the authorities' stretched resources. Her duty was a blade with 2 edges, each promising to cut her. On the independent freighter Starlight's Hope, a child named Lena pressed her face against the cold plasteel of the viewport. She was watching the glitter field, what her father called the broken ring of the choir. He said the ancients built it to listen to the universe. To her, it just looked like spilled sugar. "Are the doctors going to have the sweet air?" she asked, her breath fogging a small circle. Her brother, barely 4, had the lung rot from the mine's failing scrubbers. Her father knelt, his hand rough on her shoulder. "They will," he said, his voice a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. The authority protects its own. But when he looked out, he didn't see the glitter. He saw the hunting grounds. "They are deliberately drawing us out." Rostova stated, her fingers tracing the projected intercept on the holo display. The 3 pirate barges were heavy, repurposed industrial haulers bristling with makeshift armor and oversized spinal cannons. The Aegis was faster, more precise, a scalpel to their sledgehammers. But 3 sledgehammers could still shatter a scalpel. Solon updated engagement probabilities. The AI's reply was instantaneous. Probability of mission kill on all 3 hostile vessels, 1.3%. Probability of the Aegis sustaining critical damage, 68.9%. Probability of the Starlight's Hope being saved, 27.1%. The numbers were stark. They were a death sentence delivered by courier. Lieutenant Commander Ben Carter, her executive officer, stepped beside her. "We can't let them take that freighter, Ava." "Not again." His voice was low, tight, with a frustration she knew intimately. They had lost a transport 2 months prior. The memory was a scar on the ship's honor. "I am aware of my duties." "Ben," she said, the words colder than she intended. She looked at Dr. Thorne, who was staring not at the tactical display, but at the ghost signature deep in the choir. Thorn felt her gaze and turned. The legends say the Seraph the Vindicator, as the oldest texts name it, was not merely a weapon. It was a court of last resort. He spoke with a quiet intensity that always felt out of place on the sterile bridge. It was built to enforce the first accord, the foundational laws of old Earth. It was a promise made steel. Rostova's patience frayed. It's a ghost story, Aris. A power signature we can't identify. A story is a vessel for a truth that has not yet come to pass, Thorn countered gently. A new icon blinked on the display. Solon's voice cut through the debate. Commander, the Carrion Kings are broadcasting. Wide beam unencrypted. The grating voice of a pirate captain filled the bridge, a man who called himself the First Vulture. Little ship of the law, the voice rasped, layered with static and contempt. We claim salvage on the fat freighter. We claim the tithe of its cargo and its crew. Interfere, and we will show your charges what a vacuum does to soft bodies. The anchorage always collects. This was the escalation. It was no longer a raid. It was a public execution. Rostova looked from the brutal calculus of Solon to the desperate hope in Thorn's eyes. Her own morality felt like a failing engine. The law she served was being mocked, its reach exposed as frail and short. The pirate's threat was not just an act of violence, but an act of narrative. He was telling the entire system that the authority could not protect them. To uphold the law, she had to become a bigger story. The mission was no longer about a choice between bad options. It was about finding a new one. Solon, she said, her voice ringing with newfound resolve. Plot a course. Take us into the choir. Carter's head snapped toward her. Commander. The gravimetric shear. We will manage it, she interrupted. She turned to face her bridge crew, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning fear. The Carrion Kings want a show. They want to teach this system a lesson about power. Her eyes settled on the faint, mysterious signature buried in the debris field. We are going to teach them a lesson about laws. The Aegis turned its engines flaring, not toward the pirates, but toward the ghost. The journey into the Dyson choir was like navigating a cathedral that had been shattered by the fist of a god. Crystalline shards the size of moons drifted in silent, patient orbits. Sections of the ringed habitat miles long tumbled end over end, their dead cities still clinging to the inner surfaces. The ship's gravimetric compensators strained, whining in protest as they navigated the distorted space-time created by the massive, silent ruins. Every piece of debris was a monument to a forgotten ambition, a testament to a power that dwarfed their own. The sheer age of the place was a physical weight pressing in on the hull. Sensors screamed as they passed close to a derelict power conduit, its dead heart still leaking exotic particles. Shields at 40%, and holding Carter reported his knuckles white where he gripped his console. This is a graveyard, Eva. Are you sure about this? Rostova kept her eyes on the forward view screen, where the ghost signature was slowly resolving into something tangible. The anchorage is a cancer, she replied, her voice steady. You don't treat cancer with bandages. You burn it out. Solon says we lack the fire. I'm looking for a bigger match. The old truth was that a map is not the territory. Here the map was a lie. Dr. Thorne worked at his own console, his face illuminated by cascading lines of archaic code he was attempting to translate. The signal is structured, Commander. It's not a natural phenomenon. It's a broadcast, but on a carrier wave we can't decipher. It's like it's waiting for a key. He looked up, his eyes wide. The legends called it the first litany, a question and a response, a test of worthiness, a test. Rostova felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's recycled air. She was a commander, not a priestess. How do you answer a question you cannot even hear? We are 70,000 kilometers from the source, Solon announced. Visuals coming online. The image that coalesced on the main screen stole the breath from every person on the bridge. It was not a ship, as they understood the term. It was a fortress of angles and planes constructed from a material that seemed to drink the faint light of the distant red dwarf. It was impossibly vast, easily 10 times the size of the Aegis, and its design was brutalist, ancient, and utterly without compromise. There were no visible viewports, no decorative elements. Every surface was dedicated to a function she could not begin to guess at. And on its prow, visible even at this distance, was a sigil. A massive carved emblem of a quill, its point sharp, laid across the pans of a perfectly balanced scale. It was real. The ghost had a body. "It's impossible," Carter whispered, the practiced calm of his command voice gone. No vessel from the pre-diaspora era could be this large. The material science, the power requirements. Solon's synthesized voice was for the first time Rostova could remember, tinged with something that sounded like awe. "Hull composition is a carbon metallic lattice I do not recognize. There are no active energy emissions. Reactor core is dormant. It is a powered-down state so complete it should be indistinguishable from the background temperature of the universe." The vessel was not just sleeping. It was playing dead on a cosmic scale. "Open a channel all frequencies," Rostova ordered. "Standard first contact protocol." The comms officer looked at her confused. "Commander Toe..." "Who?" "To the ship," she said. "Assume someone is listening." A hail was sent, a packet of data containing greetings in 1,000 languages, mathematical constants, and the charter of the Intersector Authority. The only reply was silence. A deep, profound silence that seemed to mock their attempt. The quiescent warship floated before them, a mountain of judgment that refused to stir. The pirates did not share its patience. Commander Carter said, his voice tense. "The Carrion Kings have altered their course. They're coming for us. They must have detected our engine flare when we entered the choir. ETA is 21 minutes. The trap had sprung. The pirates were no longer after the freighter. They were after the Aegis, and they had cornered it against the flank of a dead god." Rostova stared at the silent vessel. The first litany, a test of worthiness. It wasn't about hailing frequencies or protocols. It was a riddle. "Thorn," she said, her mind racing. "The legends. The ship was a court." "How does a court begin?" Thorn looked up from his console, his expression unreadable. "It begins with a plea," he said softly. "A statement of grievance. The plaintiff presents their case before the judge. A plea, not a demand, not a password, a story." Solon Rostova commanded, her voice sharp with sudden startling clarity. "Open a simple broadcast channel. No encryption, no protocols, just raw audio, and patch it through to the ship's log recorder." She took a deep breath, the air tasting of ozone and finality. This was either the most inspired decision of her career or the last. "This is Commander Eva Rostova of the Authority cruiser Aegis. I am filing a grievance under the tenets of the First Accord." She paused, letting the words hang in the void. "The territory of Kepler 186 is afflicted by the actions of a lawless entity known as the Carrion Kings of the Obsidian Anchorage. They engage in piracy, extortion, and the murder of civilians. They prey on the weak and defy the legitimate authority that seeks to protect them. Their actions create a ledger of suffering, a debt of pain that goes unanswered. She looked at the tactical display at the three hostile HFY cons closing on their position. They are right now moving to destroy this vessel and its crew to silence a voice of the law in this sector. We lack the strength to stop them and to protect the innocent. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the immense silent hull. We petition this court for adjudication. We ask for the law to be weighed. We ask for the scales to be balanced. For a long moment there was nothing. The silence returned heavier than before. Carter started to speak, but Rostova held up a hand. They waited. 1 second. 10. A minute. The hostile icons grew closer. Then a low hum vibrated through the Aegis, a resonant frequency that seemed to pass through the hull and into their bones. On the view screen, a single point of light appeared on the prow of the ancient vessel. It was the fulcrum of the balanced scale in the sigil. Then 2 more lights illuminating the quill and the pans. A voice spoke not over the comms but directly inside their minds. It was ancient calm and carried the weight of millennia. It was genderless, vast, and utterly dispassionate. Who speaks for the accused? The question was not a request. It was a demand for cosmic order. The bridge of the Aegis was paralyzed by a silence born of pure shock. The voice in their heads was a violation of physics, a telepathic broadcast from a machine that was supposed to be dead. It was the ghost speaking, and its first words were a challenge. Rostova found her voice first, her throat dry. The accused are not present. They are pirates who do not recognize this or any other authority. Irrelevant. The mind voice replied at the thought echoing with the chill of deep space. All parties are subject to the law. Their plea is entered by their actions. Their defense is the void they create. The ledger is open. Evidence is being weighed. A beam of pale white light, no thicker than a wire, lanced out from the awakened ship. It didn't strike the Aegis. It moved with impossible speed, sweeping across the debris field. It touched the tumbling ruins of habitat rings, the frozen husks of ancient drones, the very dust between the shattered moonlets. Solon's synthesized voice stammered with data overload. "Commander, that beam, it's not energy. It is a stream of coherent data. It is reading the space-time foam. It's accessing quantum records of past events." It was not a sensor sweep. It was a ship reading the history of the system from its very fabric. The light touched the projected path of the Starlight's hope. It lingered on the location where the last transport had been destroyed. It traced the burn scars on asteroids where desperate vessels had been cornered and gutted. The voice returned its dispassionate tone, now carrying a new resonance like a bell tolling a final verdict. The grievance is found to have merit. The accused's actions show a consistent pattern of violence, theft, and the disruption of order. Their account is in debit. The debt is called. Rostova watched, mesmerized, as the ancient vessel began to truly awaken. Panels slid back along its hull, revealing systems that had slept for eons. A soft internal luminescence began to glow from within, outlining its severe geometric frame. It was like watching a mountain wake up. The power readings that had been a ghost were now a supernova flooding Solon's sensors with energy levels that were orders of magnitude beyond anything in the authorities' arsenal. "The pirates are hailing us," Carter said, his voice a strained whisper. "The first vulture. He's laughing." On the audio, the pirate captain's voice was filled with manic glee. "You ran to hide behind a rock, little officer, a big, dead rock. Did you think we wouldn't follow? Now we'll crack you both open like eggs. A bonus prize." They didn't understand what they were seeing. They saw a target, not a judge. They were about to be taught the difference. The ancient ship, the Vindicator, did not move. It simply acted. From a series of apertures along its dorsal spine, a swarm of objects was launched. They were not missiles. They were small, mirrored drones, thousands of them. They moved without any visible propulsion, arranging themselves into a vast concave dish between the Vindicator and the approaching pirate fleet. The formation was precise, elegant, and utterly terrifying in its speed and scale. The law is a mirror, the adjudicator's voice stated in their minds. It reflects the truth of an action back upon the actor. The Carrion King barges opened fire. Their massive spinal cannons designed to crack asteroids and overwhelm capital ship shields unleashed devastating beams of pure particle energy. The raw, unrestrained power surged across the void, enough to vaporize the Aegis 10 times over. But it never reached them. The beams struck the drone mirror, and they were reflected, not scattered, not absorbed, reflected perfectly back along their exact path of origin. For the briefest instant, the pirates on their bridges must have seen their own doom hurtling back at them. The 3 barges, built for brutal offense with minimal defense, vanished in 3 simultaneous silent blossoms of incandescent plasma. The light of their self-inflicted destruction washed over the Aegis's bridge, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The battle was over before it had even begun. There was no exchange of fire, no tactical maneuvering. There was only a sentence delivered with mathematical precision. This was not war. This was celestial accounting. The drones returned to the Vindicator as quickly as they had deployed, settling back into their silos. The behemoth floated in the void, its internal lights glowing softly. The pirate attack force was gone, reduced to expanding clouds of superheated gas and molten slag. The silence they left behind was more profound than the one that had preceded it. It was the silence of a problem that had been erased from existence. A single line of text appeared on the Aegis's main display, transmitted from the Vindicator. It was not a greeting or a threat. It was an entry in a ledger. Case 1 in Re-Starlight's Hope. Grievance filed by Isa CMD Rostova Eva. Verdict guilty. Sentence executed by Mirrored Sovereignty. Account balanced. Ledger closed. Rostova sank into her command chair, her legs suddenly weak. She had come seeking a weapon. She had found a force of nature that quoted legal doctrine. Solon's voice broke the spell, its calm processors struggling to contextualize the event. Commander, the energy expenditure from the hostile vessels was perfectly contained and redirected. The efficiency of the reflection was 99.9997%. Such a thing is not physically possible under our understanding of thermodynamics. Update your understanding, Solon Carter muttered, staring at the screen where 3 pirate ships used to be. The voice of the adjudicator returned to their minds, its tone unchanged. The immediate grievance is resolved. The larger imbalance remains. The obsidian anchorage is a perpetual source of debit. Its account must be audited. The intent was unmistakable. The Vindicator was not done. It had settled a single case, but the court was now in session, and it had a long docket. "What are you?" Rostova asked the question broadcast from the Aegis. "I am the Vindicator," the reply came. "I am the memory of the law. I teach by numbers, and I remember by ledgers. I am the consequence that does not forget. You are the plaintiff. You have standing. Present your next case." Rostova looked at Thorn, whose face was a mask of pure, unadulterated awe. He had chased a myth, and the myth had turned out to be more real and more terrible than any of the stories. She then looked at Carter, who was already running damage control scenarios, and calculating the political fallout of possessing an ancient godlike superweapon. Then her eyes went to the tactical plot. The Starlight's hope was safe. The immediate threat was gone, but the adjudicator was right. The anchorage remained. Its Carrion kings would learn of this. They would not be afraid. They would be angry. They would see the Vindicator not as a judge but as the ultimate prize. She had awakened something that would change the balance of power in the entire sector, perhaps the galaxy, and it had appointed her its chief litigator. The responsibility was crushing. The power was terrifying. But as she looked at the ledger entry on her screen, at the cold, hard finality of the words "account balanced," she felt something she had not felt in years. It was not hope. It was certainty. The certainty that for the first time the law had a weight that even its enemies could not ignore. The price of justice was about to be calculated for all to see. News of the pirates' impossible demise traveled at the speed of light, but rumor traveled faster. On the mining outpost of Kepler 186e, patched-together comms terminals lit up with frantic, fragmented messages. A freighter crew, their voices shaking, spoke of a ghost ship and beams of light that turned cannons back on themselves. Miners, their faces smudged with grime in the flickering lamplight of their subterranean homes, passed the story in hushed tones. They called it the scale ship. For the first time in a generation, the shadow of the obsidian anchorage seemed a little less absolute, a little less permanent. A seed of defiant hope had been planted in the hard, sterile rock. Aboard the Vindicator, the transition was seamless. The adjudicator granted the Aegis docking clearance, guiding it into a cavernous bay that could have held a dozen such cruisers. The moment the umbilical clamped onto their airlock, the internal gravity of the Aegis was overridden by the ancient vessel's own field. It was smoother, more stable, a testament to a technology that had perfected fundamentals they were still struggling with. Rostova, Carter, and Thorne, prepared to board, clad in standard-issue environment suits they suspected were entirely unnecessary. Solon's voice came over their private comms, its processors working furiously. "Commander, I have analyzed the adjudicator's initial data stream. The language it uses, the concepts of ledger, debit, and account, it's not a metaphor. The ship's core programming is a form of hyper-advanced legal and economic doctrine. It processes reality as a series of transactions that must be balanced. So it's an accountant with guns," Carter quipped, his attempt at humor falling flat in the tense airlock. "It's a system of justice that is self-executing." Thorne corrected, his voice filled with reverence. "We have laws and we have warships. They are separate things. The ancients built a warship that is the law." Rostova nodded, the weight of her new role settling on her shoulders. "Let's go meet the judge." The interior of the Vindicator was as austere and imposing as its exterior. The corridors were vast, cathedral-like spaces lit by a soft, indirect light that emanated from the walls themselves. There was no crew. Only small, silent drones that hovered in the air performing maintenance tasks with an unhurried efficiency. The air was clean, sterile, with the faint metallic tang of ozone. The mind voice of the adjudicator guided them, a silent presence leading them deeper into the heart of the ship. It led them not to a bridge but to a chamber that could only be described as a hall of records. Immense pillars reached up into a darkness that swallowed the light. The walls were lined with what looked like servers or data cores, each one pulsing with a slow, rhythmic light. In the center of the chamber was a single large holographic display currently dormant. This was the courthouse. This was the counting house. "This is the primary ledger," the adjudicator's voice filled their minds. "All actions witnessed and adjudicated are recorded here. The record is permanent." Rostova stepped forward. We need to understand what you are. We need to know your limits, your purpose. My purpose is the enforcement of normative order as defined by the foundational accords, the adjudicator replied. My limits are defined by the evidence presented. I cannot act without a grievance. I cannot judge without data. I am an instrument. You, Commander, are the hand that wields me. The immensity of that statement struck Rostova. The ship was not an ally. It was a tool, the most powerful tool ever conceived, and it had just declared her its operator. The conflict was no longer just about her conscience versus her duty. It was now her moral judgment amplified to the level of a system-destroying weapon. Carter saw the danger immediately. What if we're wrong? What if we present a case based on incomplete intelligence? We just saw you execute 3 ships without a trial. Their trial was their action, the adjudicator corrected its tone unyielding. They fired lethal weapons. The mirror returned what they offered. It is the purest form of reciprocity. There was no judgment of intent, only a balancing of the physical event. This was the core of its logic. It was terrifyingly simple. It did not care about motive or desperation. It cared only about the numbers on the ledger. An act of violence was a debit, and it would be balanced. This was a lawful path, but it was a path without mercy. Rostova realized that her job was not to aim the weapon, but to provide the context to argue the case to ensure the adjudicator's perfect cold logic was tempered with a wisdom it did not possess. The cost of a mistake would be measured in worlds. The obsidian anchorage will retaliate, she stated, turning her thoughts to the immediate threat. They have a fleet. Dozens of ships led by a capital-class vessel, the Carrion Crown. They will see you as a prize to be taken. They are a debit on the sector's ledger, the adjudicator stated. Their continued existence generates compounding imbalance. A full audit is required. Present the data. Solon Rostova said into her comm. Transmit everything we have on the anchorage. Every shipping manifest they've raided, every distress call, every casualty report. Give the adjudicator our entire case file. The AI complied. A torrent of data flowed from the Aegis to the Vindicator. On the central holographic display in the chamber, the information resolved into a terrifying 3-dimensional web. It showed networks of piracy, smuggling routes, tribute payments from terrorized colonies. It showed the faces of the dead, the names of the lost ships. It was a decade of unchecked criminality rendered as a single damning exhibit. The adjudicator processed the information in seconds. The light from the data cores pulsed faster, the hum in the chamber deepening. The evidence is sufficient. The debt is substantial. The Carrion Kings of the Obsidian Anchorage are in gross violation of foundational accords. 1, 3, and 7 prohibitions against unprovoked aggression. Piracy and slavery. A plan for rectification is required. What kind of plan? Carter asked warily. The holographic display shifted. It now showed a schematic of the entire Kepler 186F system. It highlighted the Obsidian Anchorage, the pirate fleet, and the major civilian outposts. And it highlighted the shattered Dyson Choir. The anchorage uses the choir's debris field for cover. The adjudicator explained its thoughts now, a cascade of strategic data. Their sensors are tuned to its anomalies. Ours are not. This provides them a tactical advantage. This advantage can be inverted. The display zoomed in on several massive intact sections of the Dyson ring, each miles long. These ruins contain dormant but functional gravitic resonators. They were used by the builders to stabilize the structure. If reactivated in a precise sequence, they can generate a focused gravity wave. Rostova's blood ran cold. A gravity wave that would be indiscriminate. It would destroy everything in its path. Correct, the adjudicator affirmed, if used as a blunt instrument. However, the law must be precise. The wave will not be a weapon. It will be a lens. The display shifted again, showing complex energy diagrams. The wave will momentarily warp the fabric of space-time. It will bend the path of light and energy. It will create a system-wide refractive lens focused on the obsidian anchorage. Their sensor advantage will be nullified. For a brief period, they will be blind, and we will see everything. It was a gambit on a scale she could barely comprehend. It was turning the entire system's geography into a component of a weapon system. It was elegant, brilliant, and held 1,000 ways to go wrong. If their calculations were off by the smallest fraction, they could sterilize a planet or cripple every ship in the system, including their own. The plan was a monument to the terrifying confidence of the machine that proposed it. This was a reckoning built from the bones of a dead civilization. And while they are blind, Rostova asked. While they are blind, the adjudicator concluded, we will deliver the bill. The proposal hung in the silent chamber, a plan of such breathtaking audacity it bordered on sacrilege. They would use the sacred ruins of the Dyson Choir, a monument to the genius and hubris of the ancients, as a weapon. Carter was the first to find his voice, shaking his head slowly. Commander, the energy requirements to activate even one of those resonators. It's astronomical. And to sequence several. The Vindicator is powerful, but that kind of power draw would leave us completely vulnerable. If the pirates attack while we're charging the things up, the plaintiff's concern is noted. The adjudicator's mind voice interjected its logic unassailable. The energy will not be drawn from my core. It will be drawn from the debtor. The holographic display shifted, highlighting the system's red dwarf star. The Anchorage fleet operates on overcharged fusion reactors, unregulated and inefficient. Their waste heat and radiation is a significant thermal debit on this system. We will collect it. Thin hair-like filaments of light extended from the Vindicator's position on the map, touching each of the pirate vessels in the Anchorage's main flotilla. Subtle energy taps will be established. They will perceive them as minor sensor ghosts or reactor fluctuations. The energy will be siphoned, stored, and then used to power the resonators. Their own power will be used to forge the lens that blinds them. The ledger demands reciprocity. It was a perfect closed loop of justice. A thief's own wealth used to pay for his judgment. Rostova looked at Thorne. The historian's face was pale, his expression one of profound, almost religious significance. It's the first accord, Commander, he whispered. Article 4. The fruits of a crime shall be the tools of its restitution. I thought it was a philosophical guideline. I never imagined it could be an engineering principle. This ship didn't just follow the law. It had weaponized the very concept of it. The path was clear, but the first step was a leap of faith into a chasm of unknown physics and ancient alien jurisprudence. She would not be the one who hesitated on the edge. Make it so, Rostova said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. The decision was made. The account was coming due. The weight of her choice felt like a physical object settling into her bones, a burden she would carry for the rest of her life, however long that might be. She was no longer just a commander enforcing the frontier. She was the executor of a will written at the dawn of human expansion, and the inheritance was a terrible and righteous fire. The law was a promise written in stone, and this vessel was its fist. In the smog-choked halls of the obsidian anchorage overlord, Kalen watched a replay of the 3 Carrion King barges vanishing. He was a mountain of a man, his face a roadmap of scars, and his body a tapestry of crude augmetics. Unlike the boisterous first vulture, Kalen was a creature of silence and brutal calculation. He saw the recording not as a defeat, but as an advertisement. It used their own weapons against them, he grunted to his assembled captains, his voice like grinding rock. Perfect reflection. Perfect efficiency. He grinned, a horrific sight of filed metallic teeth. Whatever that thing is, it's the greatest prize in the sector. More valuable than 1,000 freighters. A grizzled captain spoke up. But it destroyed 3 of our best ships in an instant. How do we fight a ghost that wields mirrors? Kalen's heavy fist slammed down on the metal table, denting it. You don't fight it. You overwhelm it. It's one ship. We are a fleet. We will swarm it, board it, and carve its machine heart out. And we will take the little authority flea that stirred it from its sleep. I want that, Commander. I want her to watch as we turn her new toy into the flagship of our new empire. He looked around the room, his eyes burning with a zealot's fire. The choir has given us a gift, a holy relic of destruction. It is our destiny to claim it. Their fear turned to greed. Their caution turned to bloodlust. The hunt was on. Power did not grant truth. It only amplified the speaker. The Aegis detached from the Vindicator, its smaller frame, a pilot fish beside a Leviathan. Together they moved back into the glittering graveyard of the Dyson Choir. Their mission was to approach 3 specific massive segments of the shattered ring, each containing one of the dormant gravitic resonators. The Adjudicator's plan required Rostova's crew to act as its hands. The ancient ship's systems were too precise, too automated. It needed the adaptable, intuitive problem-solving of a human crew to interface with the cruder, more decayed technology of the choir's ruins. Thorn. You're on the first resonator, Rostova commanded from the Aegis's bridge, which had become the operations command center. We'll patch Solon through to your suit's HUD. The Adjudicator will feed you the activation sequences, but you'll have to manually reroute the power conduits. The original connections are dust. Thorn, leading a small engineering team in a shuttle, gave a thumbs up on the screen. It's like being asked to hotwire the Ark of the Covenant commander. A privilege. Carter coordinated the second team, while Rostova oversaw the entire operation. Her mind stretched between tactical displays, engineering readouts, and the constant calm stream of data from the Adjudicator. The mental link with the ancient ship was a strange intimacy. She could feel its immense patience, its absolute certainty. It did not hope for success. It calculated it. Her own anxieties felt like a noisy disruption in its clean, silent world of logic. The work was slow and perilous. Thorn's team had to navigate the zero-gravity interior of a ruin that had been silent for millennia, its corridors choked with the crystalline dust of ages. They pried open panels crusted with vacuum-welded frost, their suit lamps cutting sharp beams through the oppressive darkness. The Adjudicator's energy taps were working. A trickle of stolen power began to flow into the Vindicator, which acted as a capacitor, gathering the energy needed for the single monumental discharge that would power the resonators. The pirates were not idle. Commander multiple contacts breaking from the anchorage Carter reported from his own shuttle. Fast attack craft. Scouts. They're probing the choir's edge. Rostova's heart hammered against her ribs. They had been discovered. Adjudicator status, the energy collection is at 34%. The resonators are not yet online. Direct confrontation is suboptimal, the voice replied in her mind. A deception is required. What kind of deception, she asked. The law is often a matter of misdirection. Show them the crime they expect to see. On the main view screen, a section of the Dyson Choir several 100,000 kilometers away suddenly flared with a massive energy discharge. The light show was spectacular, a contained plasma explosion that mimicked a reactor breach. The pirate scouts immediately changed course, swarming toward the false signal, like moths to a flame. It created a decoy. Carter said, his voice laced with admiration. A massive, complex decoy using a focused emission of microwaves to excite a dust cloud. It's theatrical. It was a lesson in how the adjudicator thought. It never used more force than necessary. It did not need to destroy the scouts when it could simply lie to them with physics. The deception bought them time. Thorne's voice crackled over the comm. Resonator 1 is online. Power conduits bypassed. She's humming, Commander. The whole moonlet is vibrating. One by one, the other two teams reported success. The ancient machines, silent for longer than humanity had been a starfaring species, were awake. The trap was set. The board was ready. Energy collection at 98%, the adjudicator announced. The debtors approach. The audit is about to begin. Rostova watched the tactical display as the main pirate fleet, led by the hulking command vessel, Carrion Crown, moved into the choir. They were advancing in a loose, arrogant formation, confident in their numbers and their familiarity with the terrain. They believed they had the Aegis and its mysterious new ally cornered. They saw the situation as a simple matter of overwhelming force. They were the hammer, and everything else was a nail. They had no concept of the invisible cage that was closing around them. All teams returned to the Aegis. Now Rostova ordered, Solon shields to maximum. Brace for gravimetric distortion. The shuttles streaked back toward the cruiser as the pirate fleet closed the distance. The lead ships opened fire, speculative shots of plasma and kinetics that splashed harmlessly against the vast, dark hull of the Vindicator. They were testing it, trying to provoke a reaction. The ancient ship remained silent, impassive, a mountain refusing to acknowledge the storm. The moment came. The Vindicator had gathered the last dregs of stolen power. The pirate fleet was in the optimal position. Rectification commencing. The adjudicator's voice declared in her mind. A torrent of energy siphoned from the very ships it was about to disable poured from the Vindicator into the three awakened resonators. For a single heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then reality buckled. There was no sound, but a visible wave of distortion erupted from the resonators, a ripple in the fabric of space itself. Starlight bent around it. The glittering debris of the choir seemed to shimmer and warp, as if seen through heated air. A wave of pure gravity, precisely shaped and focused, washed over the pirate fleet. On the bridge of the Carrion Crown, Overlord Kalen watched his sensor screens turn to garbage. Ghost images bloomed and vanished. Targeting locks failed. Communications dissolved into a howl of static. "What is this?" he roared. Some kind of electronic warfare, find its source. But it wasn't EW. It was more profound. The very space their ships occupied was being twisted. Their navigational systems, which relied on stable gravitational references, were suddenly lying. Ships began to drift off course, their automated thrusters firing erratically as they tried to correct for a universe that no longer made sense. They were blind, deaf, and lost in a funhouse mirror of warped space-time. From the perspective of the Aegis, the effect was terrifyingly beautiful. The pirate fleet was encased in a bubble of distorted light. Their own engine flares bent back on themselves, creating halos of fire. Their weapons fired into nothing, the energy beams curving away into the void. They were trapped in a cage of physics, their greatest strengths, numbers, and aggression rendered utterly useless. The lens was in place. Rostova felt the strain on her own ship. The Aegis shuddered, its inertial dampeners whining as they fought the edge of the gravitational tide. A console sparked, showering an ensign in harmless light. "Minor power fluctuations across all decks," Carter yelled. "Hull stress is at 70% of tolerance. The ship is holding, but barely." This was the cost. To stand so close to the act of judgment was to be scorched by its passing. The adjudicator did not waste the opportunity. "The debtors are isolated. The account will now be detailed." The Vindicator moved. It didn't surge forward with raw power. It simply arrived. One moment it was passive, the next it was gliding through the pirate fleet like a shark through stunned fish. It ignored the smaller vessels. Its target was the Carrion Crown. But it did not fire its main weapons. Instead, a series of smaller precision energy beams lanced out from its hull. They were not designed for destruction. They were scalpels. One beam struck the Carrion Crown's primary command bridge, not with explosive force, but with a focused burst of electromagnetic energy that instantly fried every unprotected electronic system. Another sliced through the armored conduits that fed power to their main weapon arrays. A third, impossibly precise, targeted the magnetic containment rings of their engine core, not to breach it, but to disrupt it just enough to force an emergency shutdown. Within 10 seconds, the pirate flagship was crippled, adrift, and silent. It had been surgically dismantled as a fighting force. This was not a battle. It was a dissection. The same process was repeated across the fleet's other capital ships. One by one, they were disarmed, disabled, and left floating helplessly in the distorted space. The adjudicator's attacks were a form of communication. Each strike was a line item on an invoice, a specific consequence for a specific capability. The message was clear: your ability to commit violence has been revoked. But Overlord Kalen was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are always the most dangerous. A new signal cut through the chaos, a tight beam broadcast from the Carrion Crown's heavily shielded auxiliary bridge. It was a dead man's switch. "Little authority witch," Kalen's voice snarled, filled with hate. "You think you've won? I have 5,000 souls on this rock. Miners, families, prisoners. The anchorage's life support is rigged to its primary reactor. A single command from me, and the whole asteroid goes up. You want to be a judge, then sentence them, or back off and let us go." The tactical display shifted, showing the obsidian anchorage. Solon confirmed the threat. "Commander, the energy signature from the asteroid's core is consistent with a deliberate overload sequence. The threat is credible." Rostova felt the blood drain from her face. This was the escalation she had feared. Kalen had turned his own people into a shield. He had made their lives the price of his freedom. Her mind raced. The Vindicator could destroy the Carrion Crown in an instant, but Kalen's dying command would still doom the thousands on the asteroid. It was an unwinnable choice, a classic hostage scenario designed to paralyze a moral opponent. She looked to the adjudicator for a solution. The actor presents a false dichotomy. The mind voice stated, its calm infuriating. The destruction of civilians is a debit. Allowing a criminal to escape justice is also a debit. Both outcomes are unacceptable. The calculus is flawed. A new variable is required. What variable? Rostova demanded. "You," the adjudicator replied. "The law is logic, but justice requires a voice. The ledger records facts. It does not negotiate. You must." The adjudicator was deferring to her. The God machine, the perfect arbiter, was admitting the limits of its programming. It could balance any equation of violence, but it could not solve a problem that was fundamentally human. The choice was hers. The lives of 5,000 people rested on her next words. Her arc was complete, from a doubtful officer to the sole arbiter of a conflict that spanned law, morality, and raw power. She took a deep breath, the recycled air of the bridge suddenly tasting sharp and real. Patch me through to Kalen. Audio only. A moment of static, and then her voice was being broadcast to the crippled pirate flagship. This is Commander Rostova. Your gambit is clever, Kalen, but you misunderstand the nature of the authority you are facing. She paused, choosing her words as carefully as the adjudicator chose its targets. The vessel that has disabled your fleet is not a warship. It is a court. It has judged your actions and found them wanting. It has passed its sentence. You are disarmed. Threats are meaningless, witch, Kalen spat back. Release my fleet, or the rock burns. There are no threats, Rostova said, her voice dropping, becoming as cold and calm as the adjudicator's logic. Only consequences. You believe you have created a situation where you can escape your debts. But this court does not forget, and it does not bargain. It only balances the ledger. If you destroy the anchorage, your debt will be absolute, and the sentence will be carried out upon you wherever you run forever. She leaned closer to the microphone. But there is another entry that can be made. A plea. You can surrender yourself and your command staff. In exchange, the court will recognize the inhabitants of the anchorage not as your assets, but as your victims. Their case will be heard. Aid will be rendered. The ledger can be balanced with justice, not just with blood. It was a bluff and a prayer. She was offering a legal framework to a man who only understood violence. She was banking on the slim chance that even a monster like Kalen valued his own life more than a final nihilistic act of destruction. A long, tense silence stretched thick with unspoken possibilities. The entire system seemed to be holding its breath. Then the adjudicator acted. A thin, precise beam of energy, barely visible, lanced from the Vindicator and struck the Carrion crown. It wasn't an attack. On the Aegis's sensors, Solon identified it. Commander, it's a data stream. An encrypted link is being established with the ship's auxiliary command systems. The debtor requires proof of the court's capacity, the adjudicator informed her. I am providing it. On the auxiliary bridge of the Carrion crown, a holographic display flickered to life in front of Kalen. It showed a single, scrolling ledger. His name was at the top. Below it, every crime, every death, every stolen credit was listed in meticulous, terrifying detail. It was the complete, unvarnished history of his violent life. At the bottom, 2 final entries blinked, awaiting his choice. One was labeled, Sentence Executed by Mirrored Sovereignty. The other was Plea Guilty. Sentence Containment Pending Restitution. Faced with the undeniable, omniscient record of his own evil and the cold binary choice it presented, the Overlord broke. His will, forged in fire and blood, shattered against the calm, mathematical certainty of the law. His voice, when it came back over the comm, was a choked whisper, I surrender. The dead man's switch was deactivated. The siege was over. The aftermath was a slow, methodical process of accounting. The Vindicator maintained the gravitic lens while authority support vessels called in by Rostova arrived to take the pirate fleet into custody. The Aegis, its hull scarred and its power systems strained, served as the temporary seat of the new order. Rostova, with Thorn at her side, oversaw the transfer of the pirate captains and the initial relief efforts for the now liberated Obsidian anchorage. They were not greeted as heroes, but with the stunned, wary silence of people who had forgotten what freedom felt like. A precedent had to be set. The Vindicator's existence could not remain a secret, and its purpose could not be misconstrued. As the ranking authority officer in the sector, Rostova made a system-wide broadcast. Standing on the bridge of the Aegis with the immense silent form of the Vindicator, visible through the main view screen behind her, she laid out the new law. Today an old power has awakened, not a weapon of conquest, but an instrument of pure justice. The vessel you see behind me, the Vindicator, is a memory of humanity's first and highest promise that the law is universal and the scales of justice must be balanced. It is not the property of the intersector authority. It answers to no fleet, no government. It serves only the truth of the ledger. She looked directly into the camera, her gaze unwavering. To those who would follow the path of the Carrion kings, know this: your actions will be recorded. Your debts will be tallied. And this court will deliver the bill. To the people of this system and all systems, know this: you have a final recourse. A grievance may be filed. A case may be heard. The age of unchecked piracy is over. The age of accountability has begun. The message was sent. The precedent was locked. The Vindicator was no longer a ghost or a myth. It was a fact, a permanent and terrifying feature of the galactic landscape. Its stewardship was her burden and her purpose. Later she stood once more in the Vindicator's Hall of Records. The central display glowed with the final entry for the case. Case 2 in Re-Obsidian Anchorage. Grievance filed by ISA CMD Rostova Eva. Verdict: guilty. Sentence: fleet disabled, command surrendered, assets impounded. Account balanced. Ledger closed. Below it a new entry had appeared, one she hadn't authorized, but one the adjudicator had clearly made on its own. Case 3 in Re-Kepler 186 E Populus. Grievance: systemic deprivation by Obsidian Anchorage. Verdict: meritorious. Restitution authorized from impounded assets. The quill on the Vindicator's sigil, visible on a remote camera feed, began to glow with a soft, permanent internal light. Power wasn't about the strength to destroy. She finally understood. It was about the wisdom to know what to build in the ruins. It was about knowing that true justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty, but about lifting up the innocent. The machine had learned a new variable, and she in turn had learned the true weight of the scales. They would remember humanity by its laws.